Justice Secretary Boying Remulla at dating Negros Oriental Governor Pride Henry Teves.
According to the Justice Chief, the younger Teves wanted to make clear that he is in no way involved in the killing of Governor Ruel Degamo.
I actually spoke with former Governor Teves already, Henry Teves. He's in the process of trying to clear his name, that he was not involved in this incident. He had no idea this was going to happen. He just wants to live in peace.
Justice Secretary Boying Remulla reveals that suspended Negros Oriental Congressman Arnie Teves is in Cambodia.
Hanggang ngayon, hindi pa rin daw umuuwi ng bansa ang mambabatas.
I think he's still in Cambodia. I think he's still there.
There is no doubt in Justice Secretary Boying Remulla's mind, Congressman Arnie Teves, he says, is the brains behind the killing of Negros Oriental Governor Ruel Degamo. Still, there are no criminal charges yet against the suspended lawmaker. What's keeping the DOJ from filing raps against the so-called executive producer of the brazen murder? And again, that question, where is Arnie Teves? We get the latest on the Degamo slay case tonight on the Chiefs. Welcome to the Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay. Kasama po natin ngayon Ed Linggao ng One News. Kasama ko po siya dito sa Mandaluyong and then online. Ami Pamintuan, Editor-in-Chief ng Philippine Star. Chiefs. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday.
Anong balita, Ami?
Siyempre, binabantayan natin yung nangyayari dun sa Balikatan, the biggest war games. Since the shutdown of the bases, no? And live fire exercises.
Oo nga, kahapon nga, yan ay inumpisa na natin. I think we'll be talking about this for a long time. I mean, at least a number of episodes.
Yeah.
Kung ano implications ito. And kasama na dito yung usapan syempre sa Taiwan, China, I mean, the whole geopolitics around the region.
And higit sa lahat, kailangan dyan pag-usapan yung how far do we let the US use the EDCA sites. And sinabi ni Secretary Manalo today, there needs to be further discussion on exactly how the US will be allowed to use the sites.
Oh.
Because EDCA itself is quite general in terms of the wording.
Yeah. We don't actually know. I mean, it's easy to actually cross a line from defense to whatever non-defense is.
Actually, that's not even in the wording of EDCA. Yung wording ng EDCA is they're allowed free use to deploy their material or material from the EDCA sites. So does that mean deploying, transporting weapons or firing of weapons?
Sa Washington, si DFA Secretary, ayusin siguro yan. I-finish nila yung wording.
Yeah.
Pwede ka
Yung 2+2. So actually, I think that's where he made the call for further discussions to elaborate on the exact parameters of the US use of the EDCA sites.
In the meantime, like we said, ito yung mga babantayan natin. In the meantime, another literal storm brewing. The first for the country
si
this
Amang.
year. Si Amang. So nasa letter A na tayo. Amang. Tropical Depression Amang. We're watching that if that develops into a
May
storm.
signal number na. I think
Is
we're
it officially?
Yeah.
Pero tropical depression pa lang yung or is it
No,
officially
may
a
signal
storm
number
na?
1 na tayo
They're projecting heavy to intense rain sa eastern seaboard, no? So, itingnan natin. Yung useful na tinatamaan naman dyan from Bicol to Leyte.
Yeah. So
Although I think this one is going to hit somewhere in the region of Visayas and northern
More on the
Mindanao.
Visayas, yes.
Talagang ganyan ang buhay sa Pilipinas. Nandun na tayo sa season na umaangal tayo sa init and at the same time we're bracing for strong rains.
Literal na weather lang.
Okay, anyway, umpisahan natin yung discussion. We will have an update and we'll have a conversation on the latest regarding the Degamo slay. We'll speak to our first guest after a short break. The Chiefs will be right back. You're watching Chiefs here on One News. Thanks for staying with us. Our first guest this evening, Department of Justice spokesperson Nico Clavano. Good evening, Attorney Clavano. Welcome back to the program.
Good evening, sir.
Hi, good evening. Ed, Robbie, Ami.
Sir, mukhang kumbinsido naman ng DOJ na mastermind, kung sino na ang mastermind. But people are asking, bakit wala pang kaso? Is Mr. Teves even a fugitive at this point?
So I guess there are two questions to be answered, no? The first question, well, when we talk about a criminal case, there is the case build-up stage, which we actually have new rules on, if you'd like to talk about that in the future. And then there's the inquest or preliminary hearing stage where the complaint is actually evaluated. And then the filing in the case in court, and finally, the trial stage. We're still here at the case build-up stage because, as you would know, it's a very complex and it's politically charged. No? So there's a lot of different things that we have to look at in evaluating this case and gathering enough evidence and statements for us to really tighten up loose ends. And as far as I can say, the case is tightening every day we work.
Okay.
Facts, evidence, statements have come to light, and we're just simply tying up the loose ends.
Okay.
So, but as of right now, there's already a structure by which an apparent destruction was cascaded to kill the governor Degamo.
Maybe you can give us an idea of what's there that gives you confidence and gives the secretary the confidence to say na this is our primary suspect as the mastermind, and at the same time, what is not there yet that will finally push this beyond that line and actually filing a case?
Yes. Well, I can paint a picture without drawing the faces. No? There are three layers in this murder. There are the gunmen, the recruiters, and the mastermind. Starting from the bottom, these gunmen do not have any motive to kill a governor for their own personal gain, except for monetary compensation. It is also quite clear that they are retired army men who have come together to commit a crime. So it's obvious that they were recruited by somebody. They would not have acted on their own. On the second layer, we have also caught the recruiter whose statement corroborates that of the gunmen. The recruiter himself also had no motive to kill a governor on his own, except for monetary compensation. So to get to the top of the layering, the relationship between the recruiter and the mastermind, we've also established that there is a long history of employment and closeness. So it's really just the mastermind's motive that is crucial here. And the announcement of this motive, I will have to leave until the case build-up stage is finally closed, so as not to jeopardize the investigation's final leg. So yun na lang po yung hinihintay natin. No? We're just really at the tip, as probably you've already heard and I've mentioned before, the second layer, the recruiter, has not been completely cooperative with the investigation. He corroborates everything down below him. All the gunmen, they support each other's statements. But whenever we start to ask about who gave the order or who gave the instructions, he stays mum. So that's the only thing that we're working on right now. We're trying to make sure that we tighten this case up using circumstantial evidence, because it doesn't seem like he's going to give a direct statement. So it's possible kasi po no, na itong the case is tightened using circumstantial evidence when there is no other conclusion left to be arrived at other than this one conclusion.
Well, sir, we do understand the desire of the DOJ to have kahit paano certainty of conviction before it even attempts to go to court. But on the other hand, the blame has been basically put on Congressman Teves for the last 2 or 3 weeks, maybe even more. Even by the Justice Secretary himself. In effect, he's already telegraphed everything everything that Teves wants to know about how the case has been going. Doesn't that put the DOJ in a bind kahit paano? Doesn't that telegraph all the intentions, all the strategies, even if you don't go into the details, pero he knows, everybody knows na siya yung titingnan ng DOJ.
Well, you're right. No, I guess on the other side of what you said is the need to be transparent with the public. And this is a case of national importance, kasi, no? And everybody was asking about this case, and it's really quite shocking to the senses that a governor was killed in broad daylight in his home by retired army men. And so we owe it to the people, we owe it to the public to really be transparent. And some people will say that it's piecemeal, but I do think that the most important part here is that we are transparent with the investigation to make sure that the integrity of the investigation and the case build-up stage is preserved. Because if on the other side, no, we hid certain evidence, we hid witnesses and statements that they've made, then a lot of doubts will come into play, and I think that's even worse. To be doubted as a rigged or as a magic type of investigation. What we're trying to do here, and what the secretary has always been his policy when dealing with the public and dealing with the media, it's always been transparency. And so, yes, you're right. The other camp may know what we have, and we're not afraid to show it because it is what it is. The respondents were arrested hours after the incident happened, and their statements have been released as well. We all just want to get to the bottom of this, and the fact that the other camp knows about what evidence we hold, then yes, they can prepare, but also we're all just helping each other, trying to get to the bottom and trying to get what the truth really is.
Attorney, apart from the question of when you will be filing formal charges, syempre ang tinatanong ng mga tao, when will the government get jurisdiction over Congressman Teves? He's reportedly now in Cambodia. And meron na kayong basis, di ba? He's facing 3 murder charges already over killings in 2019. Pwede na bang basis yun to request for cooperation with this is a fellow ASEAN member? Can we ask them? Pakipadala na nga dito yan at wanted namin yan.
Yes, that's actually a possibility, no? There's what you call the extradition process, and there's also the deportation process. When you talk about extradition, meaning to say there's already an agreement between 2 states whereby the requesting state will request for the extradition of a certain suspect or a defendant in a case, and the requested state will have no choice but to extradite. Sa deportation naman, which I think will be the most logical process here because we don't have any extradition treaty with Cambodia, it becomes a matter of diplomacy. It becomes a matter of international cooperation between 2 states, where when one requests, it's still up to the discretion of the requested party, whether or not they will deport or not. So, we really have to play this the right way and make sure that we close the case and we tighten the case as much as possible so that we have really enough basis and evidence to show that this person is really ripe for deportation.
Attorney, do we know, the rest of the travel history in recent weeks of Congressman Teves, and is he in Cambodia precisely because, as you pointed out, we do not have an extradition treaty with Cambodia?
Actually, sir, even I was surprised to know that we only have extradition treaties with 13 different countries. And that's not a lot. And Cambodia is one of those countries that we do not have an extradition treaty with. So, yes, it's possible that he chose Cambodia as his place of how do you say it? Asylum, maybe not. But I don't. We also have information that he has some interest in Cambodia, business interests at that. So that might be another reason why he's there. Although I'm no authority to speak as to why he's where he is.
Yeah, but you did say you did say it now becomes a matter of diplomacy, especially with a fellow ASEAN state. How would you describe, if any ongoing conversations with Cambodia on this matter?
Well, the Cambodian ambassador did actually visit the DOJ 2 weeks ago to discuss other matters, and well, the secretary did mention that we were on process. We were investigating a case where the respondent or a possible respondent was rumored to be in Cambodia, and the Cambodian ambassador was very cooperative and was open to the possibility of receiving this deportation request.
How does that work, sir? A case has to be filed first before deportation proceeding advances, or can it proceed from now? Right now we don't have a case yet.
Yes, we'll have to wait for the case to be filed in court. And in terms of the timeline, like I said, it's more of the quality that we're looking at. No, we want to make sure that we have an airtight case before filing anything. This is actually the first case that we've applied the case build-up rule, which basically mandates the prosecutors to be on the ground to help law enforcement agencies gather and collect evidence on the scene.
But
Can
just
we
to
seek
beg the question,
deportation? Di ba meron na nga meron na nga 2019 murder
2019,
cases,
yeah.
3 murder cases. Di ba pwedeng basis yun for deportation request?
Yes, although the 2019 case is still in it's still here with the DOJ, no. So we have to file the case in court for this to happen.
Meron pa nung gun possession charges, hindi ba pwedeng compounded na yon? Just to move along the process. How hard is it ba? How complicated is it to seek deportation? Typically, how long might it take?
It could take as fast as 1 week, or as long as a couple of months, depending on the law enforcement agencies in the requested party or state. Here, in our experience and in this administration, I don't know if you remember the Japanese deportees.
Yeah.
Yes.
That all happened in about 2 weeks. So if the Cambodian government acts with the same type of vigor and the same speed, then we may be able to get the deportation within the same amount of time.
Yes, sir. Pero sir, to Ami's point, the 2019 cases are much further advanced compared to yung Degamo case. So are you considering, for example, using the 2019 cases to seek deportation of Arnie Teves, or will you wait talaga for the Degamo case?
Well, the discussion hasn't been held yet. We probably will wait until the resolution of this case before considering deportation, because it will seem quite of a stretch and a fishing expedition if we used an older case just to get the respondent here for this new case. We want to do things properly. We want to do things cleanly. So we will probably have to wait for this case to be filed in court before we ask or request for deportation.
Yeah, I'm to that point, Attorney. I mean, I'm not being facetious here, but I'll be honest. When the 2019 case was brought up, that was precisely the impression of a lot of critics already, that this was something being used as an excuse habang mahina pa yung kaso sa Degamo. In the meantime, here's something that's ready and for which there was already case build-up. Now, if I understand you correctly, you're saying we don't want to use that because that might create the impression, therefore we may. But doesn't that just actually, ironically, feed the earlier impression na, so pati yung 2019 pala, wala pa. Pati yung 2019, there was really nothing there, and we're gonna wait for build-up, for a case build-up on this current case after all.
Yes, well, the complainant in that case kasi was a lawyer, a private lawyer, that came in, and we had no idea that case was going to be filed in the first place. So that impression, yes, I understand where people are coming from, where why only now when the incident happened in 2019, but also it's because the authorities or the government using a whole of government approach now after the mastermind of this Degamo slay has encouraged a lot of other victims from the past to come forward. So now that they know that the government is on their case as well, incidentally, no, they gathered enough courage and confidence to file the case now. And I thank you for bringing that up, no, because it gives me the opportunity to clarify that. Pero itong 2019 case was not even expected by the DOJ. The DOJ through the NBI had no involvement in the filing of this 2019 case. So yes, I understand again, no, the plight of the people, and if you're not reading the news specifically or in detail, you really will think that the 2019 case was just a way to catch him in another sense or in another incident. But this is the case that we're after. This is the case where the AFP, PNP, and NBI have come together to build up the case. And in that case is the Degamo slay.
Okay, if deportation can be complicated, can you request Cambodia to keep an eye on Congressman Tevez, or at least inform the Philippines in case he leaves Cambodia?
Yes, well, there are several options we have. No, one is to request Interpol through the Office of the President to get him on the blue list, since he is not yet a defendant in court and is simply a respondent in the prosecutor level. He will fall under the blue list instead of the red list. Another is the
Tony, what's a
deportation.
blue list?
The blue list is the list in the Interpol where respondents in a case filed with the prosecutors are listed. The red list are for the defendants who are charged already in court.
Okay.
So it's a step further if you want to put somebody on the red list. As for your second point, whether we can keep eyes on the mastermind, well, that again will go into the diplomacy and the international cooperation between two states. As of today, no request has been made to keep an eye on him or to find out where he really is or to locate him. But we are toying around or considering these options.
Okay. Attorney Clavano, I think you alluded to this earlier, and certainly we do want to get into it. You mentioned the new standards of the Department of Justice for moving forward on a case, in particular, if I got that right, certainty of conviction as something that we aspire for. Where would you rate where we are at this point on the Degamo slay and the case build-up against Congressman Tevez?
It is right about the reasonable certainty of conviction. When you talk about the reasonable certainty of conviction, the standard there is a prima facie case, whereby all the elements of a crime have to be backed up by evidence. If you reach that level, it means that if all the elements if all the evidence, are left uncontroverted or left unanswered, then the case will stand on its own. So we are at that point already, really tight. So once we seal that and we're able to clearly and without a doubt identify the mastermind, then we are ready to file the case.
Okay, Attorney Clavano. Sir, maraming salamat po.
Thank you, sir.
Attorney.
Salamat.
Attorney Clavano is spokesperson for the Department of Justice. And we'll start up another conversation after a quick break. The Chiefs will be right back.
companies are implementing a hefty increase in pump prices today. This fuel price hike had been widely expected after OPEC announced additional cuts in production.
The Energy Department can't say for certain if the big-time oil price hike today will be the last, at least for the next few weeks.
Sa ngayon kasi talagang napaka-volatile, masyadong magalaw. Ayaw namin magbigay ng projection.
Baka matulungan pa tayo ng DOTR at saka ng gobyerno. Particular po yung LTFRB na magkaroon po sana ng ayuda na lang, mga cash subsidy po sa ating mga kasamahan.
And welcome back to the Chiefs.
Magandang gabi, Sir Ed, at the rest of your kasamahan dito sa program.
Yes, sir. Well, sir, a big-time oil price hike today. Just a week ago pa lang nag-announce yung OPEC ng production cuts by, I think, 3.66 million barrels per day. So, isang linggo pa lang, tumaas yung presyo. Ito ba'y konektado o meron pa tayong inaasang mas malaking pagtaas ng presyo dahil sa cut na ito?
Well, Sir Ed, if you notice that the past 3 weeks na adjustment are all decreases.
Yes, sir. Downward.
That was those were actually the result of the successive interest hikes, another round of interest hikes implemented by ECB and U.S. Federal Reserve. But all of a sudden, we have this reversal of trend towards an increase this week. Precisely, you could really say, without a direct statement from the analyst, but it would appear that the connection is there. Announcement by the OPEC for an additional decrease of 1.16 million barrels per day of crude oil production. This was actually in addition on top of the earlier announcement of a voluntary reduction by Russia of around 500,000 barrels. So in total, you have 1.66 million additional on top of the last November 2020, 2 million barrels of crude oil production. Reduction also. These are pledges. The 3.66 million that you mentioned are actually pledges. So there's no other really an event that would really reverse the trend other than this. So you're correct, Sir Ed.
Pero sir, it's only been a week at nag-react agad yung prices. But help us through this. The ordinary buyer, the ordinary consumer ng langis, ang alam niya, yung langis na binobomba niya kaninang umaga, naiangkat na rito 15 days o 3 weeks before i-announce ng OPEC yung cuts.
Sir Ed, when we deregulated, we now subscribe most of the international effect in terms of price is now on a daily basis because of the daily trading practice in the international market. So when you talk about weekly adjustment, usually on Tuesday, it doesn't mean that you're just talking about 1 day of adjustment. It actually accumulates the previous week adjustment, which is the 5 trading days. So the timing is not really the issue. The adjustment that consists of in that particular Tuesday actually includes all the 5 trading days. So,
yes, sir. The entire week, sabihin natin. The entire week. Para
yes, so hindi po natin imamatch yung nangyayari dun sa inventory versus what's happening in the trading prices because, the oil company has to reflect what's happening on the trading prices that appears on a daily basis. So, ganun po talaga ang deregulated, Hindi po siya mamimili ang oil company na, Wednesday lang ako. Because that would also be detrimental. Pag ganun po ang discretion ng oil company, then lalo tayong at the mercy of these oil companies by choosing I would just choose the day with increases and I will not choose the days with decreases. Unfair po yun. So
yes,
we have to consider the daily adjustment
Sir,
and reflect it.
Sir, I mean, we're being squeezed on both sides, both the supply and the demand side on the one hand, ito, nag-cut ng production ang OPEC. And then just 2 weeks ago, they were saying tataas ang demand because of China. They were expecting that as China opens up, tataas yan. So lower supply, higher demand, talagang nahihirapan tayo. But all of this, of course, happening outside of our borders. Is there anything here that we control, or are we just completely in this ride with whatever OPEC decides?
Well, OPEC, actually the OPEC Plus, which is now a composition of around 23, 13 OPEC, original OPEC member countries, and non-OPEC allied countries, which are also 10. But of course, the biggest of them is Russia, and the rest are just not even as close as Russia. We have Kazakhstan, which is around 1.55, and the rest are less than 1 million in production. So it's really Russia when you talk about non-OPEC. And Saudi Arabia, when you talk about OPEC, because almost 10 million also, 9.86 in fact on February 2023, the production of Russia. The rest are also just around 1 million to as high as 4 million for Iraq. Well, the issue here is that when they implemented November 2022, the pledge for 2 million, they have actually implemented only up to now. The actual implementation is just around 40% reduction of that 2 million. So we're just talking about 800,000 barrels that they're able to reduce. So now we have an additional announcement of 1.66. So the question now, ang tanong kasi ng market is that, paano yung 1.2 na pinangako nyo before na i-reduce no? Hindi nyo na-reduce until now. And you're now saying na may additional ka na namang 1.66 na wala namang klaro kung paano ibababa yun. So now, actually, ang hindi nila na ibababa from that original 2 million is around 1.2. So, malaki po ang question niya ng market. In fact, our expectation, if this will not be sustained, even next week, this is going to be a question now of daily monitoring, because we have now the result of the Monday trading price of this week. Negative na po ang nangyayari international price trading price for the Monday of this week. So see now the result. You talk about sustained decrease. You cannot expect a sustained decrease. Again, tama po yung sinabi kanina ni Assistant Director. Really the issue now, the supply and demand is so balanced. It's around 101 million barrels supply, 101 million barrels demand. So really, it's really very volatile. It can go both ways, increase or decrease. Well, this is now a question of how OPEC would be able to deliver the additional 1.6 when they're not actually able to deliver the 1.2 way back November.
Are you seeing a supply crunch for the Philippines? Kasi yan ang problema ng mga tao ngayon.
Way back November, there was, again, it accumulated, the 800,000 that they're able to reduce, accumulated throughout how many months? And, well, the market was able to compensate and absorb that at this point in time. So, really, there's no crunch now. Even these pronouncements are going to be implemented starting May. So wala pa hong crunch ngayon, and the market now is really doubtful that they will be able to deliver the 1.66 when actually they were not able to deliver the 1.2 originally way back November. So this is really, there's no supply crunch. To cut it short, there's no supply crunch unless they're really able to reduce around 2.8 million.
Well, there's a proposal now na mag-G2G daw tayo, government-to-government negotiation with countries like India, China, even Russia, para lang daw sigurado yung supply natin. You think that's feasible?
Well, there are important factors. Number one, we are deregulated. In fact, all of our oil companies are now in the private hands. Yes. So, kailangan po ma-onboard po ang mga private sector because they will be the one ultimately buying these products, even if it's a government-to-government transaction. So that's a good thing because probably a government-to-government will give you a preferential treatment in terms of price. Probably the government could also exempt local taxes like excise tax and value-added tax when the time comes. So these are options. But of course, you have to onboard the private sector. The government has no expertise now. We don't even have the necessary asset to set up immediately the receipt and delivery of petroleum products to the end consumers. We don't have gasoline stations. We really don't own storage capacities. So the private sector has to be onboarded, and of course, the government has to take the lead if this is going to be the direction.
Sir, but we do remember nga the president when he was in New York, I think, but when he's in the US, he mentioned that we had great interest in engaging with Russia for the purchase of oil. I'm not sure if he was referring to crude oil or oil products. I think we've been importing oil products from Russia in the past in varying amounts. So at the very least, the president himself said that. We were wondering lang if there was any follow-up by the government. I know you mentioned that it's a private sector initiative mostly, but is there any movement from the side of government, if at all? And is it a serious move?
Oh, well, wala pa hong clear direction on the next steps, Sir Ed. Probably because una po, we've gone down from the start of the year. For example, the gasoline has a common price of around 67 to 68 common price when we started the year. Now it has gone down to 65. It has not increased. There was actually a large decrease in diesel from 64 pesos per liter. Now it's down to around 54 to 55. So these are really factors that affected probably the no categorical action on that part because we really see no supply crunch. In fact, the effect of the interest hikes of Europe and the US has really affected so much the demand that it has gone down to even out the supply. Before, when we are at probably at May to June of 2022, there is an undersupply of around 2 million barrels. That's why the price has gone up to as high as 85 to 90, even in some parts of the Philippines with 100 peso per liter price for gasoline or diesel. But now it has really gone down to around 55 for diesel. So I think that speaks of the balance.
I mean, that is exactly what OPEC is saying, notwithstanding everybody saying that this was a surprise cut. OPEC is saying we needed to do this to stabilize prices. How legit or how valid is that rationale? And I guess to this point, I mean, how confident can our economy and our economic managers plan on the stability that OPEC is projecting?
Well, I would like to take on the numbers. For example, in February 2023, the pledge of production level for OPEC Plus, this is OPEC Plus, is around 40.10 million barrels per day. But they were only able to produce around 38.19. So if you look at that perspective, they're not already able to fulfill the 40 million pledge. That's supposed to be the pledge. That's the agreed pledge. But they're not able to produce that. It's lesser than almost more than 1 million. So here comes another additional of 1.66. Really, the market is doubtful for of OPEC being able to deliver additional 1.66 when they're not able to deliver around 1.1 million from the October agreement of reducing 2 million. They're only able to deliver around 800 to 900 reduction. So there's no supply crunch. It's even out now. Their plan is doubtful at this point in time. So the market is reacting. As I've said, the Monday trading price has now gone down. In fact, if we continue this trend up until Friday, then we will be expecting rollback next week.
Okay.
Director, you know, the global economy has reopened no, from the pandemic and people were expecting aakit yung demand for fuel. Pero ito nga, bumababa pa yung presyo. Even China is reopening. So people are wondering how big a role yung shift to alternative energy in what's happening now.
Well, malaki po yung initiative na ginagawa in the Philippines. We have a new set of laws. For example, we just passed conservation efficiency law. We also recently passed the electric vehicle law development act. So these are laws that are geared towards looking at how we can minimize fuel usage if you cannot avoid it. But at the same time, we're turning to electric vehicles to avoid fossil use. Now, we also have this transition power. When you use power, you'll be using power in the end, not the direct fuel, the fossil fuel. So you have to look at also electricity, a transition on that part, which is now being done. We have now the entry of LNG. 2 LNG regasification terminals are expected to come online this year. For the Philippines, these are really pioneer projects. So these are intended to provide an alternative fuel other than coal, for example. That will be natural gas. So I think this administration, especially our secretary, is really aggressive in the support of indigenous way of capping up our shortage in energy supply, especially electricity. So andyan po yung renewable. While we're trying to go out from coal, we're trying to transition a replacement for that with natural gas. So aggressive po ang Department of Energy with our secretary sa renewable energy. So to provide the sufficient power to develop the electric vehicle industry in this country.
Speaking of the electric vehicle industry, sir, ibababa na nga ang tariff sa mga EV, and you're expecting more people to shift to this. But if you look at the whole thing, what else needs to happen in the ecosystem of motoring in the Philippines and transportation for it to really be a viable, not just an option for consumers and drivers, but really something that's viable, as sustainable and convenient for that matter for the people?
Well, it's always the design. Of course, in Europe, for example, you have almost in all public parking areas, you have readily available charging stations. But the good thing in the Philippines is that these car manufacturers actually analyzed our situation. And in fact, we have the so-called hybrid. This has actually resolve the gap from transitioning towards availability of charging stations, sufficient availability of charging stations. While there is no such sufficient availability of charging stations, we have the option from these manufacturers to have this hybrid, meaning you still use partly fuel with an embedded generator in the vehicle, but part of now being charged in terms of electricity to the batteries is what you you recover from the wheels of this vehicle. So this kind of innovations, the way they look at the Philippines, for example, and other ASEAN countries, which do not have this yet the sufficient supply of charging stations, enable us to start off and probably develop the transition period towards really getting into non-fuel, non-fossil electric vehicle. So while the hybrid is there, it will not stop us from developing electric vehicle. For the meantime, that the charging stations are not yet sufficient for us.
Well, apart from the electric vehicle infrastructure, are there any other initiatives or incentives in the pipeline to promote renewables?
Well, renewable is already part of SIPP with the implementation of the CREATE law. It's malaki po yung recognition sa renewable energy to be prioritized in the SIPP, and we know that the CREATE law rationalized the incentives. Now, most of the comments from the private sectors that ano lang to cream of the ice cream, no? Parang hindi naman incentive talaga ang habol, no? It's really the environment, the policy, the contracts that are really being implemented in the country with consistency. Diyan po talagang mahalaga, no? Yan po ang binabantayan na dapat if you have a contract for 20 years, that contract should be followed without misinterpretation later on. So it's really the doing of business that they're really getting into. But of course, if there are incentives, why not? So yun po, andyan na po yan, rationalized po yan, and we don't expect, of course, to be adding a specific law providing another set of incentive and then veering away again to the rationalized way of providing the all sectors the consolidated and rationalized incentive. So ayaw po natin kasi na maraming batas hindi na maintindihan ang gulo na whereas we have one specific law centralizing all incentives, providing the criteria that gives the country the advantages rather than disadvantages in providing incentives. So value for money, that's the end of it all. But of course, private sectors are more interested in a good, consistent business climate rather than these incentives.
Okay, Director Abad. Sir, maraming salamat po.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Director.
Yes, thank you and good evening.
Mr. Rino Abad is Director of the Oil Industry Management Bureau. And that's all we have for the Chiefs. We hope it was discussed. We'll keep the conversation going. I'm Robbie Alampay.
I'm Ani Pamintuan of the Philippine Star.
I'm Edwin Gao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.